Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all. A few familiar faces and lots of new faces.
Good evening, everybody. It's great to see such an amazing turnout tonight. As Rupert's just said, the tennis has conspired to time. It's the match with Cameron Norrie just finished there, perfectly on time. For those, I've seen a few familiar faces. For those who don't know me, I'm Karl Morris. I've been working in performance in sport for the last 25 or 25, nearly 30 years or so now. So I've had some interesting experiences over that time. I got interested in Rupert's work a few years ago, and Rupert, we did a podcast, I think about 2 months ago, something like that. There was a really tremendous response from a lot of people about your non-dual approach to life, to sport, to business. And I thought it would be a great opportunity to see if we could enlarge on that a little bit. Focusing tonight on sport, discussions all around the zone. What is it? How can we get there? What takes us away from it? But for maybe, Rupert, for a few people who perhaps haven't heard any of your work before, you could maybe just give a sort of short backstory and short introduction, and then we'll get underway with the content of the evening. You're muted, Rupert. You just need to unmute yourself. Sorry,
how's that?
That's good.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Well, thank you, Karl, for inviting me back, and hello and welcome to everyone. A short backstory. Perhaps I'd just say this, that the non-dual understanding or the non-dual teaching is the understanding that underlies all the great religious and spiritual traditions. In fact, if we were to sum up the last 2,500 or 3,000 years of spiritual and religious thought, practice, understanding, it could be summarized in this simple way. Peace and happiness are the very nature of our being, and we share our being with everyone and everything. So these two statements, the first refers to our inner life. The peace and happiness are what everybody seeks and loves above all else. And the non-dual understanding, in however it is expressed in all the great traditions, say that peace and happiness are the very nature of our being. And all that is necessary to access them is to go directly to our being, which lies, so to speak, behind our thoughts, feelings, actions, relationships, and so on. And then in relation to our external experience, that is our activities and relationships, the non-dual understanding suggests that at the deepest level, we share our being with everyone and everything. That is, in spite of the apparent division, the apparent multiplicity and diversity of objects and people and animals and so on. There is a single, infinite and indivisible whole or reality from which everyone and everything derives its existence. So peace on the inside and our shared being, that's the experience of love or beauty. The recognition that we share our being. So these are the two aspects of the non-dual understanding: peace on the inside, love on the outside.
What are you eating? What are you eating, baby?
Thanks, Rupert. I thought just to set the scene for the evening, I wanted to relate a story of a conversation that I had recently with a young Ukrainian boy. A young Ukrainian golfer who currently is one of the best amateur players in the world, and it was an extraordinary story, really. His father got in touch with me and wanted me to do some work with him and to perhaps help him with his game going forward. And I met up with him on Zoom and I asked him about the early days his game. And he said that in Ukraine, that what him and his father used to do every week, that their kind of father and son ritual that they had every Saturday was to go out on the bikes, and they would go for a long bike ride. And he said that week after week, month after month, they would follow the same route. They would go on this particular route because they liked the scenery, liked the countryside, and it was quality time that they would spend together with each other. And he said, out of the blue, one Saturday morning, that he asked his father. He said, "Dad, I'm sick of going on this route now. Can we go on a different route? Can we cycle and can we look at a different journey?" And he said that Dad was fine with that, and off they went cycling on a completely different route than they'd been before. And partway, a few miles into the bike ride, they actually came across a golf course. And Lev said, he said, "I'd never seen a golf course before. I didn't even know what a golf course was." He said, "But immediately that I saw this golf course, something inside me actually stirred, something happened." And he said to his dad, he said, I want to have a go at that game. I want to play golf." And of course, his father, as all fathers do, and engineered getting him started. And it was from that moment of seeing this golf course completely out of the blue that he started to play. And he said he just became absolutely fascinated about the golf course, about how to hit a ball, the shots that he was playing, things like that. He just loved every single moment of that. And it got me thinking, Rupert, that it sounded like such a pure experience for him, that he was entranced by the environment of the golf course, couldn't wait to play, became absorbed in the game. And the point that I'm going to get to eventually is that my great fear for this young player is because he's become so successful so quickly. He's actually played in a European Tour event, one of the youngest ever players at 14 to play in a European Tour event. And my worry would be that he perhaps loses some of that essence, that pure joy as he gets drawn into what the game may give him in the future, or what the accolades that he may receive in the future. What would be your thoughts on that? Again, Reb, you just need to unmute yourself. Sorry.
I seem to be spontaneously muted from time to time. Yeah. So what would be my thoughts, Karl, on the possibility of him losing the connection to this pure joy?
Yeah, this pure experience that he clearly had with the game, that he gained such a connection to the game just by finding this golf course. Didn't know what golf was, and it's just something about the game drew him in.
Yes. So when he first saw the golf course, it kind of awakened this deep memory in him. When I say memory, I don't mean to imply that he had remembered playing golf in some previous life or anything like that. I'm not suggesting that, but it stirred something very deep in him, a memory of some core, the core aspect of himself and its deep connection to nature. That's why something outside of himself triggered it. So that was a very, it was unsolicited, pure, and it gave rise to this deep desire to explore what is this golf course, what is the game. Then he starts playing, he starts practicing, and so far his love of the game, his joy at playing the game is not yet tarnished by the pressure of competition and potential success and failure. So he's probably still in touch with that pure joy, the initial impulse that made him want to explore the sport in the first place. Of course, if he carries on and is as successful as you indicate he may be, all the pressure will then pile on, the expectation and most likely the anxiety, the fear, that comes with it, and these may at least temporarily eclipse this pure joy that he feels. But there will be moments still when he's relieved of all that pressure and fear and expectation and so on, when it's just him and the game, when he'll feel again that pure joy. And there will be moments throughout his career where he makes contact again with that pure joy, that pure love that is the real motive of him playing the game. Much deeper a motive than wanting to win a competition or achieve fame or achieve success or wealth. Or he'll get in touch from time to time with this deep motive. So I don't think there's much chance that it will go completely, because it's obviously so deep in him. But it may be obscured by the pressure of the game as he becomes, if he turns professional and becomes more and more successful. And in a way, the extent to which he remains in contact with his pure love and pure joy will be largely, those around him will have a big effect on the extent to which he's able to remain in contact with this joy, his coach, his family, the people around him. Because if he's just, you said he was 14.
Yes,
that's very young to deal with a lot of expectation and pressure.
Yeah. And what was also interesting as well, but when he described his kind of absolute joy at being on a golf course in the environment of a golf course. And one of the things that I've sort of explored with people in golf and in other sports is the idea that you can either look at the environment as a foe or as an ally. So that if we look at the golf course, as many golfers would perhaps do, would see the golf course almost as a dangerous place where mistakes can happen and things can go wrong, as opposed to being an ally where the golf course allows you to create shots. It frames the way that you can play. And I think we touched on this in the previous podcast, that in other sports where you have a direct opponent, you can either look at the opponent in a negative way as somebody to overcome at all costs, or potentially you could see the opponent as being part of the process of drawing out the best that you've got to offer. What are your thoughts on that in terms of your perception of the environment, whether that's the golf course or your opponents? Because I think these things, when somebody, my experience has been, when somebody has been really, really tuned into the environment of the golf course, that is potentially an entry point into the zone experience, where they just get lost in the experience.
Yes, exactly. To take the second of the two definitions of the non-dual understanding I gave, namely that we share our being with everyone and everything, or to put it another way, that there is reality is one. It's not composed of separate elements and objects and selves, but at the deepest level, reality is one. Now, if that is the case, then there can be no real opponents, because reality cannot oppose itself. Reality, if there's just one reality, reality must always be on its own side. So in order to consider that one has an opponent, one has to separate oneself out from reality as a separate individual, and then oppose whoever or whatever one has separated oneself from. And as soon as one does that, then the other becomes the opponent. We become the separate individual. All the tensions, the stress, and everything that accompanies the sense of separation is then generated as a result of dividing reality into considering ourselves separate from the opponent. However, if we stay with the understanding that reality is one, reality can never oppose itself, then, for instance, nothing that takes place in the ocean, no activity of the ocean could ever harm the ocean. It's just more of itself. The ocean could never be against itself. So if you take that activity in sport, for instance, let's take tennis, it's topical. Take the great rivalry until recently between Federer and Nadal. Both of them said that they were the players they were. They became the players they were partly as a result of their great rivalry, that they cooperated with each other's success. And this, whether they actually, of course, they considered the other their rival, but at a deeper level, the other was, the so-called opponent was helping each of them raise their game. In that way, they were cooperating with their success. And so whether it's an environment, a golf course, a football pitch, or an individual opponent or a team, to think of them in this way, that they are not opponents. They're on your side. They're helping you raise your game. They're presenting you with problems in order to push you to find something in yourself that you've never yet done, to help you to just extend beyond your limits. If you were only ever to play with someone within your comfort zone, there'd be no need to go beyond yourself. There's no need to transcend yourself. So if the opponent, the purpose of the opponent is to help the player transcend themselves, which means transcend their limits. So, and that's as soon as we feel separate, that's all we ever want to do, really. All this, the apparently separate individual seeks, is to be divested of their limitations. And in the case of sport, an opponent is one who will expand us beyond our customary limitations, make us transcend ourselves, find something in ourselves that we didn't even know was there, go beyond ourselves as an individual. So yes, the golf course, the football pitch, the opponent, ultimately they're on our side, and that's the way we should think of them. Because as soon as we think of them as other, as negative, then we are really reaffirming the sense of our own separation. And the sense of separation is a cramp. It's a limitation on who we truly are. So anything that expands that sense of separation expands us beyond our limits, and in sports will enable us to perform above and beyond any previous performance. That's when you enter the zone. That's when people do things. Well, anyone that's been watching Wimbledon these last few weeks, people do things that we wouldn't think were humanly possible, because and they wouldn't have thought it. The individual player wouldn't have thought it possible of themselves, simply because they've had to raise their game. They've had to go transcend their limitations and perform at a level that they didn't even know was possible.
The ironic thing is, as you've mentioned, with some of the tennis players there, I mean, I'm reminded, we touched on this in the last podcast, that in the great rivalry of Borg and McEnroe going back into the 70s and the 80s, that after they'd finished playing, they actually became great friends.
Yes.
Even though they appeared very different characters on the tennis court, after they'd finished playing, they realized that they'd got far more in common than they ever could realize when they were at the height of their playing powers.
Yes, absolutely, Karl. Because really, there are exceptions, of course, and we've seen exceptions. Wimbledon over the last few weeks, that there have been exceptions to this, but the rivalry, it's not really personal. It's not. It's very rarely personal. A rivalry between two people. It's a contest of skills. The person doesn't come into it, and you see Nadal and Federer. They're good examples. They're good friends. You often see it. You often see it in football. People who play at an international level for the same company, playing for the same country, playing on opposing teams. Before the game, they're friends. After the game, they're friends. During the game, nothing personal comes into it. It's an impersonal quest for excellence, for perfection. It's not to do with a battle between people, between personalities. Occasionally, it descends into that. But on the whole, to play sports at an elite level, you have to transcend your personal preferences and likes and dislikes. If you play at that level, you're never going to reach the higher echelons of sports, or I would suggest many professions.
And from a non-dual perspective, how would you view the quest for performance, or the quest for improvement? Is that a good thing, or should we be cautious about that?
No, I think it is a good thing. You see, reality. If reality is one, then there can be no imperfections in reality. From the point of view of the one reality, it must be perfect, because anything that was imperfect would be something other than itself. So from the point of view of the individual, of course, there's good, bad, right, wrong, perfect, imperfect, success, failure, and so on. But from the point of view of the one reality, well, what does winning and losing mean? What would the one reality consider? How would the one reality consider winning and losing? It wouldn't make sense, because it doesn't stand to gain or lose anything from the game, because it's already complete, it's already perfect, it's already whole. So I would suggest that at the deepest level, sports, I would say this was true of anyone's quest for perfection, but in relation to sports, I would say that the quest for winning, it's not really a quest for winning, although it's true that quest is sometimes appropriated by the ego. But at the deepest level, the quest for winning, it's a quest for perfection, not to create perfection, but to somehow bring the perfection, bring the wholeness that is already the nature of reality into manifestation. So that's why an artist, a business person, an elite athlete are never satisfied. Even if they're at the top of the game, they're still not satisfied. Even if you're a very successful artist, artists are never satisfied. There's always that possibility of bringing the perfect nature of the whole into manifestation, even more in a more powerful, more evocative way. So I think this quest for perfection is a reflection in each of our finite minds of the perfection that is the nature of the one reality.
Because the interesting thing that I think many people who tuned into tonight have probably had this experience, but probably one of the most graphic for me has been, I've been fortunate to work with some pretty high level golfers over the years, and various sports, but the kind of illusion that I'll be happy when I win the tournament, I'll be happy when I get on a certain tour, or I get to play for England or whatever. And probably one of the sort of starkest examples for me was a chap that I worked with who won what would be the ultimate for a golfer. He won the British Open at St Andrews, and he won by 7 shots. And I remember seeing him a couple of weeks later, and he doesn't mind me sharing this because it's, we've sort of laughed at it since. But 2 weeks after doing the ultimate in the game of golf, I remember going into his apartment. He was in Spain playing in a tournament, and him and his wife were pretty miserable. Suddenly life was having to change. They were having to, look at maybe moving house, go to America. Schedules had changed. Life was actually throwing problems at them. And I thought, my goodness, this guy has done the ultimate that any golfer can ever have.
Yeah.
And the happiness didn't last for more than 14 days. It disappeared. Yes. And I think, we can fall into the trap, can't we, so easily of I'll be happy when I
Yes.
achieve something, as opposed to,
yes.
to me, if there is an entry point of the zone, it is that understanding of I call it going first, that you decide to be happy first, with the opportunity to play your game, knowing that happiness, that sense of gratitude to be able to play the sport actually is a great foundational place to express the best of your skills.
Yes, exactly. And this what you're really referring to, Karl, is the first of my two statements earlier. The aspect of the non-dual understanding that relates to our inner life, which states peace and happiness are the very nature of our being. So what's happened? Let's say someone during a golf tournament, the tournament or the match or the tournament, it may last for a number of hours or a number of days, and during in the duration of the game or the match, there is obviously tension. That you're always going towards the end point. The end point is the end of the tournament, the end of the match, the end of the game. And so there is tension emotionally, psychologically, physically. And then at the end, you score the goal, you win the game, you win the tournament, you achieve what you were seeking. So the seeking mind comes to an end, and with it, the tension that accompanied the desire to win. So when you win, when you score the goal, when you win the point, there is this momentary dissolution of the seeking, and in fact, it's a dissolution of the mind. At that moment, the mind, the seeking, the aiming for the future point comes to an end, and as a result, the background of happiness, which is our nature, shines in that moment because it is no longer obscured by the seeking mind. Now, of course, when the mind rises again, it says, oh, it was scoring the goal, winning the point, winning the tournament that created the happiness. No, it wasn't. Winning the tournament put a brief end to the seeking mind and allowed our innate happiness, which was always present in the background, but obscured by the activity of seeking, to shine briefly. And of course, if we invested our happiness in winning the point, winning the game, winning the tournament, then sooner or later, the fact that we won the tournament, its power to dissolve the seeking mind will come to an end. So the moment you win the tournament, yes, all seeking comes to an end. At that moment, you feel joy. 2 days later, you still won the tournament, but that fact no longer has the power to bring the seeking mind to an end because the seeking mind hasn't been uprooted. It has just been temporarily ended by winning the tournament in this case. So 2 days later, the seeking mind has just come back again. It's still dissatisfied. It's still seeking. It's still going for something in the future. And as you say, your friend was not happy, not because happiness was absent. No, the same happiness was just there lying in the background of his experience or in the depths of his being, but it was now obscured again by the activity of seeking.
And I think that also ties in very, very much with another direction I wanted to explore tonight, Rupert, and to kind of frame it. I don't know if there are many cricket fans on the call tonight. Maybe if we've got a few people from tuning in from the US, they think that strange game that you can play for 5 days and still not get a result. I once remember listening to an Australian gentleman trying to explain that to a group of Americans, that you could play a game for 5 days and end up in a draw. And he was trying to say that some of the most exciting cricket is when you do get a draw at the end of it. So that was a tough sell. But what I'm getting to is that the English cricket team recently, we've gone from I think they'd played 17 test matches in the previous few years and only won one of them. The captain, Joe Root, stood down, and it was kind of in free fall. We were kind of bottom of the pile, and they've got a new coach, Brendan McCullum from New Zealand, who's come along, and they've won the last four matches, the last 4 test matches. Every one of them with what would seemingly previously seemed an impossible run chase. The last test match that they won, but actually broke the record for the highest number of runs that they scored in the final innings in the whole of Test cricket for England. So, and it's the same team, it's the same players, and just a transformation from a few weeks ago to here. And one of the golfers that I work with actually knows Brendan McCullum personally, and he says that, as I said to him, what can he have said in that period of time that can have made such a difference to the attitude of the England team? And he very quickly said, McCullum's got a great way of allowing people to play sport without fear. And it seems such a paradox, really, Rupert, in the world that we're in at the moment with everything that's going on, that I do see so many people, and I've certainly experienced this myself, and I would think a lot of people on the call tonight would relate to this. There is an awful lot of fear in playing sport, and especially, curiously, in sports where you're not going to get injured. I mean, I could imagine there would be a reasonable argument for being fearful if you stepped in the boxing ring with Mike Tyson at his best. You could understand that visceral fear, but nothing too much can happen on a golf course, really. But I get so many people who say, I'm terrified of the first tier. I feel so much angst. What are your thoughts, and what directions could you potentially ask people to explore around the whole area of fear in sport as a barrier to the entry point of the zone?
Yes, well, fear, as you say, it's not a physical fear. It's a psychological, emotional fear, and that comes from our sense of our identity. That we build up a sense of a personal identity, and that identity is dependent upon or invested in whatever we achieve. In this case, whether we win or not. So our sense of ourself is derived from, not from the place it should be derived from, which is namely our being, but it's derived from our activities, our relationships, our successes, and so on. So if our sense of our identity is invested in this case, in our successes, then our sense of ourself is going to be very fragile, prone to being annihilated as a result of a loss or a failure. So I think it all comes down to where our sense of ourself is invested. Is our being really aggrandized in any way if we win a competition, or is it diminished in any way if we lose? No, we're the same being that we were before or after. Our being is not aggrandized by winning. The ego is aggrandized by winning. I did it, aren't I marvelous? That's our self-image, but our actual self, our essential being, is not aggrandized by winning, and it is not diminished in any way by losing. So it is the extent to which we are established in our essential nature, the fact of simply being or being aware, that will determine the extent that fear dictates our game.
And what would be some practical ways on a daily basis people could connect more with that sense of self?
Just to start by noticing that whatever happens, either internally in terms of our thoughts and feelings, and whatever happens externally in terms of the environment, activities, relationships, and so on, that there is an element of ourself that remains present and unchanged throughout all this changing content of experience. And that is simply the fact of being, or being aware. And most of us overlook the fact of being aware in favor of what we are aware of. We're so, that by which I mean we're so involved with our thoughts and feelings on the inside and with our perceptions, activities, and relationships on the outside that we don't notice that in the background we are simply knowing or witnessing or aware of all this content of experience, the inner content of thoughts and feelings, the outer content, perceptions, relationships, and activities. So the first step is really to take a step back from the content of experience, realize I'm not just this bundle of thoughts, feelings, sensations, activities, relationships. At the deepest level, I am that which is aware of them. And it's like taking a step back from our experience. I'm not the content of my experience. I'm that which is aware of my experience. I'm not this bundle of thoughts and feelings. I'm that which is aware of thoughts and feelings. And this is the first step to, first of all, recognizing that being aware or awareness is our fundamental nature. And in time, we become more established in that, as that. And as a result, in relation to sport, the fear that accompanies performance, it loses its hold on us because we are less invested in the result. I don't mean by that that we are less ambitious. No, there is still this drive for perfection, which manifests as our drive for desire to win. But because our sense of ourself is no longer invested in the outcome, we are able to perform free of fear and, as a result, free of tension. And therefore, we perform at a much higher level.
And that presumably doesn't have to be a formal meditation practice. It can just be an awareness that you can be aware of during the day. Absolutely.
You're answering your emails, just a brief pause between emails. Who am I really? Am I this mixture, this bundle of thoughts, feelings, sensations, and so on? Or am I essentially just the one that is witnessing it all, the one that is knowing it all, the one that is aware of it all? In between shots on the golf course, in between points in a tennis match, you just go back 2 or 3 seconds. You go back and you reestablish. You go back to your true nature and you stand there, and that has an effect. Just as psychological fear has a physical effect on the body, it tenses the body up. So the fear and the body are very closely connected. Likewise, this taking a step back, relaxing back into the presence of awareness in the background of experience will have a corresponding effect on the body. The body will relax. And I imagine, I'm not a golf player, but I am a tennis player. It's very difficult to play tennis well if you're tense. It's very difficult to perform any sport well if you're tense. I can't imagine you can perform a golf shot with tension in your arms and shoulders, and
it's probably the biggest killer of
it's the biggest killer of course.
Games.
Of
course. I remember hearing a Tai Chi master years ago, Rupert, saying, I thought it was a great phrase. He said that tense muscles are weak muscles and they forget. And I didn't probably understand at the time really what he meant by that. Tense muscles are weak muscles and they forget. And basically what he was saying, that yes, that tension in the system doesn't allow us to coordinate movement, but that tension in a way creates a disconnect from brain to body, so that we forget the movements that we've practiced, we forget the movements that we've trained, and we have that experience of seeming like, how on earth can I play so well in practice, and then I go out on the golf course or the tennis court or the football pitch, and it can be such a disconnect.
That's a very nice example, Karl. You often see after a tennis player has made a mistake, they put the ball in the net, and their opponent is serving, and they'll just do a shadow swing, sometimes just with their hand or sometimes with the racket. And what they're doing then, they may not rationalize this to themselves, some may not, but what's happened is that they put the ball in the net, or they put it wide because of tension. So they've played the wrong shot, and the memory of that, the trace of that wrong shot remains in the body. It was the last shot to be made. So its trace, its echo remains in the body. And by performing the shadow swing, which is the correct swing, of course, and they do a shadow swing, there's no ball and there's no opponent. So you can perform the shadow swing with perfect relaxation. They are erasing the memory of the previous shot. They're resetting their body in the place of relaxation, the proper place from which to play the next shot. So it's very nice. I like what your Aikido master said. You have to erase that memory in the body, and you erase it by relaxation.
Yes, yeah. And pursuing this line a little bit further, there's a great video available on YouTube. It's Tiger Woods, I think it's called Tiger Zone. And it's an interview. He doesn't normally give too much away, Tiger Woods, but in this interview, it really is quite revealing. And it was taken around the sort of turn of the 2000s when he was totally dominant in the game. He was at one point so far ahead as world number one that I think he could have not hit another shot for 2 years and he would still have been world number one. He just totally dominated the game. But in this particular interview, he talked about some of his best golf, some of his most amazing performance. He felt like he didn't remember too many of the shots that he hit. And he said he constantly kept having the experience of almost observing himself. Again, I would imagine we're tying directly into what we've been discussing tonight from a non-dual perspective, being more aware of being aware.
Yes, exactly. So in those moments, when he's playing at the height of his abilities, he's not thinking or feeling, I am Tiger Woods, I'm playing, I'm deciding, I'm choosing. All of that is all of that's the ego that comes in after the event. But during the event itself, you're so one with the body, your golf club, the ball, the environment, the weather, the entire. You're so there's just the totality of the situation, including all the elements involved in it, and you haven't my thought hasn't separated you out from the totality as a separate individual that is choosing, deciding, doing, succeeding, failing, and so on. That's the ego that comes in, that is present before the game, and that comes in after the game. It's what Jean Klein said when he said that the ego is like the clown that comes on after the performance to take the applause. He wasn't present during the performance. He just comes to, didn't I do well? And he receives the applause. It's the same. The I won, I lost, I failed, I succeeded. All of that comes in after the game. The I'm afraid, I can't. That comes in before the game. But in the game, when you're really performing at the height of your ability, you have no sense of I, of being a separate self. No fear, no sense of choice. You feel you can't go wrong. Why? Because the universe can't go wrong. From the universe's point of view, it's always nothing that takes place in the universe harms the universe. So you feel you can't go wrong. You're so one with the totality. You're not even one with it. There's no you there present either to be one with it or not. You are just the totality in action. You are just your body and mind are simply the whole in action, and that's why. And this feeling is always accompanied by joy. It's almost addictive. All sports, certainly at an elite level, but I would think in most people have certainly had. Everyone has certainly had this experience in their life, whether they formulate it like this or not. This loss of the sense of being a separate self. It's the experience we call love, because love is the collapse of separation, the collapse of self and other. And it's always accompanied by joy. Why? Because joy, peace, happiness are the nature of reality. So yes, in those moments when Tiger Woods, he would have just been totally relaxed, performing without fear, transcending his own limitations over and over again, breaking his own records.
It does help when you've got some skills like Tiger Woods as well to get into that place.
Of course, you have to have the skills, and the skills require, of course, extreme focus, extreme discipline. But in the moment, in the competition, you forget all that. Your body and the mind, they've been trained previously. You forget all that, and you just enter into the zone. You become one with the environment, and you just become you're the universe in action in that moment, and you're relaxed. You feel you can't go wrong. You feel you can't miss.
And would you recommend that to be able to take advantage is maybe the wrong word, but to experience this on a more sort of regular basis, from a practical sense, it would be worth anybody who does play sport, before they go out to play, to just take some time to contemplate some of these ideas and tune into this before you actually go to the environment of the tennis court or the football pitch or the golf course.
Absolutely, Karl. Yes, because in the heat of the moment, it's difficult in the heat of the moment with all the pressure. It really, this is when the exploration, the investigation, the practice that you've done off the court serves you during the game. You build up a kind of a reservoir off the court that then remains with you, so that then in the moment, in the heat of the action, a situation that would previously have caused you fear, tension, anxiety, it no longer has that power over you, because of the time you've spent off the court establishing yourself in your true nature of simply being aware, or awareness itself. So yes, very, very much so. I would recommend some kind of simple exploration of one's true nature, and returning there again and again. And then you might just return there for moments, briefly, just in between your serves in tennis, just that 2-second relaxation. You see it actually. Nadal is a classic example. Here's the little ritual he goes through before every serve. We're all familiar. Anyone that watches tennis is familiar with this quite lengthy ritual that Nadal goes through between serves. The ritual with the water bottles between games. What's he doing? He's aligning himself. I think it's very unlikely that he would formulate it in these terms, but what he's really doing is he's aligning himself with the universe. He's just putting himself in line by performing these little rituals. He's putting himself in line with the universe, which is another way of saying he's transcending the ego. So these are little rituals that he does, that he knows if he goes through these rituals, it puts him in the right place. What is the right place? The right place is to be one with the universe, to be devoid of ego or the sense of separation. And this is what he's doing. And these are just little physical rituals that place him in the right place from which to play his best game.
Yeah, it's something over the years that I've encouraged people to explore, and even just a contemplation before you go out to play your tennis game or your football match or your cricket game, just to ask yourself some simple questions. It might be, what am I committed to today, or what's important to me today? And the actual physical act of writing out some of those things. Yes. Because everybody tends to want to warm up physically before a sport, and understandably to stretch and things like that, but to just contemplate for a few moments before you go to play sport. It doesn't guarantee that the performance is going to be great, but I think it does guarantee that the experience is going to be better.
Yes. I do it myself, Karl. When I'm bicycling down the road to the tennis club here, I do the same thing. I put myself in a certain frame of mind. I say to myself, what is if everything were to go, if you were to let go of, if you had a really bad session, you would let go of everything. What is the one thing you want to be able to say at the end of the session that you managed to achieve? And it's very often something like relaxation. Whatever else you lose, whatever other technique you may lose, did you stay loose and relaxed? So just something like that makes a big, and then I remind myself, little intervals between points, I remind myself.
And your background, for the people who don't know, was as a potter. What were the sort of zone experiences for you like? Because I would imagine it's a solitary pursuit, or a very solitary pursuit, but there must have been many occasions where time stood still, days disappeared when you became totally absorbed in your craft?
Yes, yes, it was a solitary pursuit, and it's a pursuit that's quite. It requires a lot of technique, not in the various stages of making, but also the glazing and firing processes. So it's a very exacting. There's not a lot of room for error, certainly in the making process if you're making large bowls on the wheel. So there's a very disciplined element to it. It requires lots of moves, lots of processes, and each process, let's say there are 20 processes from start to finish, every single one's got to be right. If any of the processes fail, then that breaks the link. So there's a discipline to it, and the discipline is demanding and exacting and takes a lot of time, hours, weeks, months, years. But then if you've submitted yourself to that discipline over a number of years, you incorporate the skills more and more into your body, so that someone from the outside will think, oh, that's a very skilled activity. On the inside, you have no sense of being skilled. It's just it's almost become second nature to you, and that's what enables you when you're in the heat of the moment. In my case, when you're actually making something where you can let go of all the disciplined, focused activities that you had to concentrate on in the early days. You let go completely, and there is again this feeling. It's the equivalent of being in the zone in sports, where you feel you can't go wrong, you can't make the wrong shape. You feel that the piece makes itself. Now it might sound a bit of a cliche to say that, but it really is that. You really come away. I had many days like this. You come away at the end of the day and you feel, when you look back, you think, I didn't do anything. The day was relaxed. It was just peace all day. But it was only as a result of the years of focus and discipline that in my later years in my studio, that I began to have this experience more and more. This feeling that my workshop, my studio was like a laboratory in which all the elements and the forces of the universe, the clay, the water, the fire, the materials, the processes, were all gathered together and were working kind of harmoniously together. And my mind and body were just two of the elements of this kind of universal process that was taking place in my studio. And there were times when it just felt as if it was happening by itself. And then you can't go wrong. And it's always accompanied by peace and joy, because you are aligned with the universe. You have put yourself you've lost your sense of being a separate individual, and you are the universe in action in that moment.
But I think there's so many parallels, isn't there? So many different fields. As you were talking about, your pottery experience there, it reminded me of speaking to a chap who was a very, very successful and effective therapist, and I remember him saying to me that many of his best sessions, or most effective sessions to help people get back on track with his clients, he would often contemplate at the end of a session and think to himself, where on earth did that come from? That he just came out with a statement or a sentence, or there was a word that had a huge impact on his client in front. Yes. And he thought, well, I didn't plan that in any way, shape, or form. Where did it come from?
Yeah, exactly, Karl. I completely relate to that in my meetings and retreats that I do now. I quite often hear myself say something that I've never thought before in response to a question. And sometimes at the end of it, I think, I often think, oh, that was a surprise. I never had that line of thought before. And I often think, oh, that was nice. That's a nice idea. I've never thought of that before. It's the same, because you're not, in order to respond to the question, or in the therapist's case, in order to respond to his or her client, you're not referring back to the past for the response or for the answer. You're referring to the situation itself, that the response is growing out of the situation. Of course, in the past, you've done your training, so your mind, whether it's a therapist, a teacher, in sports, you've done your homework in the past, so your mind and your body have been trained. You know the A to Z of your craft back to front. But in the moment, you let go of all that, and the response, whether it's the response of a therapist, a teacher, a response in a tennis game, it comes in the moment. It grows out of the moment. And that's what allows for inspiration. So your therapist is describing inspiration. It's a response that comes not from the past. Your response is not an extension of the past into the present. It's something that new, that arises in the present, that you have never thought of, that nobody's ever seen before. And it arises in the present in response to the dialogue that you're having with your opponent on the other side of the net, with your client in therapy. It's inspiration. It comes from outside the normal field of mind in which you operate. You're not referring to the past, and that it's inspiration. And that can happen in sports. It can happen in therapy. It can happen in business.
And would you say this, Rupert, that part of it is actually having the courage to let go of too much structure? I mean, I've been in situations where in rugby, I've been in dressing rooms, in team situations where I've seen the coach or the manager is really under pressure because there have been a series of results that haven't gone their way. And as a sweeping generalization, I think coaches who are struggling say too much and they give too much structure, and there's too much planning in there. Whereas when people are brave enough to keep it simple, it allows the players to then go out and respond moment to moment to what the game or the course or the match is asking of them.
Yes, exactly. Because in that moment, it's very rarely a physical problem. You're trailing, you're losing, the tension builds up, the implications of losing begin to rise in your mind. So the coach's job, of course, there may be something tactical to say, a substitution, change of tactics, and so on. But really, the coach needs to liberate the players from their fear and from the tension that accompanies their fear, to enable them to play freely. And in doing so, that's when inspiration and creativity happen. Creativity doesn't happen when you're dominated by fear and just trying to reproduce the past. So that's why that's the task of an inspired coach, even when losing, to be able to encourage his or her players to play with freedom, without fear.
I think back to what we were saying about Brendan McCullough with the English cricketers, that it seems exactly that.
Yes,
you know, I've watched them recently, and Johnny Bairstow and Joe Root, players like that. You think, where on earth did that shot come from?
Yes,
they probably don't even know.
Exactly. Yes.
Rupert, I'm conscious of time, and we'll open up for some questions in a moment or two. I just wanted to mention your latest book. You Are the Happiness You Seek. We were talking before, and it really is a wonderful book. And I think of all the things that you've written, if people haven't heard of or haven't sort of read any of your books before, it's a great entry point. Was that not the purpose behind writing the book? Did you see it as a more practical way for people to begin to understand more about the non-dual approach?
Yes, Karl. It was. I wrote it during lockdown, and one of the positive sides of lockdown for me was that I began to get invitations from people such as yourself, Johnny Wilkinson, Barry, who I believe is attending today from the Metropolitan Police, the Nationwide Building Society. I began to get invitations to speak to people from outside the relatively small field of non-duality that I was accustomed to speak in. And this, it stretched me in a good way. I was asked questions that I would not normally be asked in speaking to my regular, relatively small group of people interested in spiritual or non-dual matters. And this, it was challenging for me in a very good way. It made me reformulate the understanding in relationship to the various disciplines, sports in your case, mental stress in the case of the Metropolitan Police. So I found myself having to reformulate the understanding and to make it to presume no prior knowledge of the spiritual traditions, not to keep it very direct, clean, clear, and above all experiential. So yes, I think and the book "You Are the Happiness You Seek" came out of this process. So I'm glad that you think that it's at least to some extent succeeded.
And as we've talked about very much tonight, I think one of the things that struck me was it Ramana Maharshi who said, was his quote, that he got to a point where whatever happens, I'm okay, or words to that. I've horribly misquoted him, I'm sure, but it's words to those effect.
You're quoting, I think, Karl,
Krishnamurti, sorry.
Who, at the end of his life, one of his students said to him towards the end of his life, do you have any special teaching for us? And of course, they were expecting some special esoteric teaching that he had never shared before. And he just replied, yes, my special teaching is this: I don't mind what happens. In other words, my peace, my happiness is no longer invested in the content of my experience, in what happens, in whether I win or lose. My happiness, I found the place of happiness in myself, namely my being. It didn't mean I don't care. He cared very much about people, but I don't mind. My happiness is no longer dependent on what does or does not take place in experience.
And you go into great detail about striving and resistance, and again,
yes,
yeah, we've covered that a lot tonight, haven't we? That doesn't mean to say that you don't intend to play well at sport, you don't intend to master the sport, does it? It's a subtle shift of understanding.
Exactly. You still go for perfection. You can still be competitive and compete at the highest level, but your sense of your own identity is not invested in the result. You know that your essential self is in exactly the same condition before the game as it is after the game. You don't, what you essentially are doesn't derive any benefit from the game, nor does it lose anything from the game. And this gives you a freedom. You deep down, you have this sense, I don't mind what happens. I know that I will remain intact at the end of the game. So it doesn't mean to say that that you cease being competitive, that you cease going for perfection. No, you still go for that, but your own identity, the sense of yourself, is not invested in the result, and this gives you freedom from fear, and thus relaxation. And because you're relaxed, you actually perform better than you would have done before. It's the zone that everybody wants to be in. And the zone is not an extraordinary state that we reach. It is the natural condition. It is being one with the universe. That's not an extraordinary state. That's the natural condition. It's just that it doesn't happen very often. That's why we think it's extraordinary. No, that should be our ordinary state. It's the natural state to be one with the universe.
And I love the idea that you talked about, with your workshop with the pottery, that it was a laboratory, and it's something that I've suggested, in sport is a great frame to go out onto the golf course and see it as a laboratory to express your capabilities. And all of a sudden, then back to what we said right at the beginning, that you are going out, and the environment with which you play the sport in is actually now a friendly environment rather than a threatening environment. And we've had a neuroscientist on the podcast recently talking exactly about that, about if you perceive the environment that you play your sport in as a threatening one, the increase of brainwave activity will preclude the ability to express your skills.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
Rupert, I think it's again, a conversation moved in all kinds of different directions. It was we didn't pre-plan too much, did we? We stuck true to our guns, and we didn't have too much structure. But hopefully, people have got something from that, and got some thought-provoking ideas that they can go away and work with. Before we get into any questions, just remind, if people don't know of you, Rupert, where can people find about your all the YouTube that you have, the countless videos?
YouTube is the best place. I have a YouTube channel. Just search Rupert Spira on YouTube. I've got numerous videos, meditations on YouTube, and then go to my website rupertspira.com, where there's more information, publications, events, and so on. Great.
So if anybody's got a question, you'll need to just unmute yourself, and we'll see what have either Rupert or myself. We've got a few minutes left, so we'll open up the floor.
I'd love to jump in if I can.
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much to the two of you. That was indeed very nice and organic. My question has to do with purpose. Thinking back of that Ukrainian golfer who's 14, is there such a thing as a higher purpose that comes from a place of love and that will be aligned with a path of spiritual awakening? Or put differently, is there a sort of hierarchy of activities that one can perform that are more or less correct from him that will facilitate his awakening, or is that a big illusion?
Hello, is it Eddie? Yes. Eddie, I would say yes, that there is a purpose that is aligned with this understanding. And it would be an intention to bring the qualities, if we can call them qualities, that are innate in reality out into manifestation. So really, we could say there are two purposes: an inner purpose and an outer purpose. The inner purpose would be to recognize the essential nature of our being and its innate qualities of peace, joy, love. Our outer purpose would be to bring those qualities out into manifestation in order to share them with society. In other words, to engage in activities and relationships whose primary purpose was not to express the neuroses, the fears, the desires, the expectations of an ego or separate self, but are rather to bring these impersonal qualities of joy, harmony, love, beauty, and so on into manifestation and to share them with society. And by doing so, the artist, the sports player, the business person, they provide a pathway for their audience, their viewers, their patients, and so on, whereby they may make this discovery for themselves.
Thanks, Eddie, for that question. Any other questions?
I could ask a question to help me reconcile. On one hand, I am really enjoying this idea of being able to find peace and happiness from within rather than trying to externally address it. One of the things that I run in a community called the Happy Startup School, and one of the things that we talk about is understanding some core emotional needs and how they align. By addressing them, they align with the work that you do. But I'm hearing on one hand that those needs that we talk about are part of this ego that we have built up around us, or has been built up around us. But the way I've been thinking about it, they also drive us to make things happen and to change things in the world. So for myself, I think I have needs for learning, play, and friendship. And so the work that I do is kind of to address that, because I see other people with similar needs. But then I understand there's this other journey of actually those needs don't necessarily lead to my happiness. I can claim that in another way. So I'm just trying to reconcile that thinking of finding peace, but actually acting in the world.
Yes. Carlos, yes, we have, obviously we have physical needs, and there are intellectual needs and emotional needs. But if we go to the deepest place in ourself, if we go to our essential being, that our being is it doesn't lack anything. It's, in other words, it's already at peace. It doesn't need, our being doesn't need to be made peaceful. It doesn't need to be fulfilled. It is inherently fulfilled. It is naturally peaceful. And that is the great, in my opinion, this is the great secret that everyone should know. That in the depths of themselves, there is a place that is at peace and fulfilled. And to discover that is really the most important thing in life, because if we don't discover that, we will continually be seeking objects, substances, activities, relationships, and so on, not for their own sake, but for the sake of the happiness we believe will be derived from them. Of course, as Karl and I discussed earlier, when you achieve the thing that will make you happy, winning the golf tournament, the relationship, or whatever it is, the happiness lasts briefly, but because it was never the real source of happiness, the old habit of seeking and resisting rises again, and our innate happiness or peace are obscured. So really, it's the greatest thing one can discover, that in the depths of one's own being there lies there is a place of peace in all of us. And the finding of that, the recognition of that, is really the most important thing one can find in life. Then, having found that, you go out into life with all your skills and so on, and share, communicate, express, celebrate the truth that one has already recognized in oneself.
Ben, do you have a question?
Yes, thanks, Karl, and thanks, Rupert, for a wonderful conversation. I have a question about the quote from Krishnamurti, "I don't mind what happens." It's a beautiful understanding, but I've met many friends on the spiritual path, and it's even myself early on in life, where I took that understanding and I really identified with it from a place of even ego. Like then, and one consequence of that is one really make it like an action as opposed to an understanding. You feel yourself paralyzed in certain situations, not being able to respond appropriately because you want to not mind what happens.
Yes.
And
yes, you can't. We cannot impose that on ourselves, and pretend that we don't mind what happens, but really mind very much. It has to be a deep understanding, and it has to be understood, of course, in the context in which it is said. It doesn't mean that we no longer do things with care because we couldn't care less about the outcome. It doesn't mean that. What it means is that our happiness is no longer invested in the content of experience. Our happiness is prior to experience, not the result of experience. And we still go out into life. We still engage in activities and relationships. We still care about them. And that's why I was careful to say to Karl, Krishnamurti didn't mean I don't care. He said, I don't mind. I do care about people very much, but my happiness is not invested in activities, relationships, and so on. And that enables me to engage in life very fully This is not a path of renunciation. It enables us to engage in life very fully, but without the demands and the neuroses and the fears of the ego interfering all the time. And that enables us to behave at the very height of our capacity and even beyond what we would normally think ourselves to be capable of.
Daniel, have you got?
So Ben, this should be a liberating understanding, not an inhibiting understanding. Sorry, you were going to ask the next person.
Daniel, have you got a question?
Yes. Hi, Rupert.
Hello, Daniel.
Yeah, my question is, when I'm playing tennis, I sometimes notice that I can get a lot of tension in my body, as you were talking about before. And well, I recently noticed that the tension was really strong, and I told the friend that I was playing with, I told him that we were playing a set of tennis, like counting the games and points and stuff. And I said I wanted to just play some balls, just loose hitting without counting. And when we did that, it went way better. I had less tension and I could play better. So yeah, it's clear that there's a fear of not being good enough, or wanting to be good enough and to perform and to win, that kind of creates the tension. And I'm curious for that, if I should focus more on like well, you could call it healing trauma, or your yoga meditations, the outward facing path. How do I know if I should focus on that, or rather on, you could say, beliefs on the mental level, beliefs about reality, believing that I'm a separate self? So the inward facing path of recognizing the self through understanding.
Daniel, explore both, because the beliefs we have about ourselves and the feelings we feel about ourselves, which are stored in the body, are very closely connected. So I would explore both fronts. But can I give you two little exercises to do when you're playing tennis?
Yes, please.
One of them, Karl and I discussed. It's a tip I got from an old tennis coach I had in California once, who was, I believe Karl and I discussed this on our last conversation. He was training a 14-year-old girl who was in one of the, I think she was at the top 10 in the world in that at that time. Can we have your image back? Oh, I've lost you. I'm not seeing you anymore, Daniel. Can you spotlight Daniel again, Karl? Anyway, I'll keep going. So yeah, so this 14-year-old girl, she would, every time she made a wrong shot, every time she lost a point, she would smile. Are you there, Daniel, still?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, there you are. Yes. So every time I think somebody's, can you just all check that your mics are muted? I think that somebody keeps coming in because their mic is unmuted. Daniel, yeah, so that's one thing. Every time she made a mistake, she would smile. It's very difficult to be tense and smile at the same time, because smiling is by definition, like laughter, it is a relaxation of the muscles, albeit only the muscles in the face. But when you smile, the whole body relaxes. So this was a kind of emotional equivalent to the shadow swing that I was referring to earlier. So, but do it physically, because if we do something physical, it has an emotional impact. If we do something emotionally, it has a physical impact. So in the game, just smile to yourself. Second thing, a little experiment you could play with your friend when you're playing sets. Two things. One, you have to play your best tennis. And two, whoever gets the fewest points wins.
So to play a set with those rules,
you have to play your best, have to try your hardest, play your best tennis, and whoever ends up with the least points wins.
Wow.
Yeah, can I
But
just,
but
can I just
but
come
you
in
have
on-
to play your best tennis.
Yeah.
Yes, Karl. Yeah.
Just to come in on that, Rupert, just to reinforce that. Again, I think we discussed this last time, that one of the top coaches in the States, working with some of the best women golfers, she had a number of players actually, before they hit the shot, smile to themselves, actually to smile at the opportunity to go ahead and hit a shot. And
Yes.
again, as just tying in with what you're saying, as we understand it, that if you actually smile, you know, there's a physical response to that. You're probably going to release dopamine into your system and dampen down the cortisol response, all those neurophysiological responses that actually engineer better movement and performance. But, you know, in answer to, again, reinforcing what Daniel said, I get a lot of golfers, you know, when you go and play golf, the score that you're told to keep is the one that everybody's been given. It's the story of par, that the 4s and the 5s and the 6s and all the rest of it. That is a story that's been handed down to you. It doesn't have to be the main focus of your game. You can create your own scores, and there's lots of things, you know, in golf, we'll get them to focus a score more on the process of what they did before a shot, or the way that they reacted after a shot. So you're actually changing the reference of the thing that actually causes most of the anxiety, which is the score, and then the placement of your ego relative to that score.
Yes.
Just one more question, and we've got Jude.
Hi, Karl. Hi, Rupert.
Hello, Jude.
So enjoying your book on happiness now. And I love what you said about being in the zone is an everyday common kind of experience. And having experienced it through numerous expressions in sports, skiing, long distance swimming, climbing mountains, and losing that sense of a separate self, and just being one with the universe, like you spoke of, not being in competition with my fellows, who's gonna go faster or who's going slower. But one thing that I'm interested in now, it's because I have had injuries and having pain, and staying in the zone without losing the sense of my being, the freedom, the peace, the natural relaxation, which pain distracts me as a cause of tension, and wanting to just, any exercise you can recommend to let go of focusing my attention on the pain, and not letting it diminish me being in the zone. Thank you so much.
It's true, Jude, that the pain tends to gather and focus our attention on a particular object, whereas being in the zone is rather the opposite experience, where our attention is so relaxed that we're no longer even focused on ourself as a separate self. Our attention is wide open and encompasses the totality. So you're right, pain tends to drag the attention down onto a specific point, and really you want to relax your attention and not have it focused on anything, to leave your attention free to respond in the moment. So all I would recommend, at least in the times when the pain is not so bad, that you just, whenever you can, you relax your attention, you go back to the presence of awareness in the background of your experience, instead of focusing on the content of your experience in the foreground. The content might be thoughts, images, memories, sensations, and so on. Just go back, feel yourself. You could even imagine the presence of awareness like a space. So you could feel that you are the space, and instead of feeling that you are locked inside your body, just feel I am the space. And in this way, your body, you feel you expand into the space. And
I understand perfectly what you're saying, Rupert, excuse me, but is it possible for me to stay in the zone with the pain?
Jude, yes, it is. Remember, being in the zone is not necessarily a heightened experience, although in the middle of a tennis match, you would experience it as a heightened moment. Remember, being in the zone is the natural state. It's not an extraordinary state. It is the natural state, and it is the natural state prior to our division of experience into two parts: self and other, me and the world. It is a natural condition, and it doesn't have to be accompanied by extraordinary performance. You can be in the zone when you're doing the dishes. All it means is that you just no longer focusing on yourself as a separate entity, distinct from everyone and everything else, but there is just the universe, and you at that moment are simply the functioning of the universe within itself. So yes, you can be in the zone when you have a pain doing the dishes, and it doesn't have to be some extraordinary experience. When you're in the zone in sports, it very often is accompanied by an extraordinary performance. So if you're a therapist, you may say something extraordinary that is particularly potent and you've never thought of before, but it can also take place when you have a headache and you're doing the dishes.
Thanks, Rupert.
Thank you, Jude.
Thanks, Rupert, for that. It's been a great session. I hope people listening and tuning in have got as much out of that as I had. We had a great conversation the first time, and I think we've got a couple more birdies tonight, and not one or two forehands down the line. So it was a great experience.
Karl, just one other question. You asked me about where to find out about my work. Just to let you know, also, I've got a next weekend, 15th to the 17th of July. I've got an online weekend retreat, which will be based on "You Are the Happiness You Seek." So that would be another place for anyone that would like to know more.
Great, yeah, and
thank you, Rupert.
Likewise, if you've enjoyed tonight, if you want to find out more of the things that I do, my website is themindfactor.com. We've recently put together a series of books on golf called the Lost Art series, so you can have a look at those. But thanks everybody for supporting tonight. I do hope you've enjoyed it and got something from it, and it's been thought provoking. It'd be great to you drop us an email or a message or something like that, and any thoughts, and we'll certainly maybe aim to do something again in the future. Have a good evening tonight, wherever you are in the world. Thanks ever so much, Rupert. I really appreciate your time.
Not at all. Thank you. It's been a pleasure being with you all. Thank you, everyone. Nice to see you.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Karl.
everybody.
Thanks, Rupert.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rupert.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.